if we continue to see each other as the enemy, like what's happening here, then the conflict continues. The local Arabs that have been living there, that now identify as Palestinian, have been caught in this war where the Jews are trying to fight powers that are trying to destroy us. Democracy is a lie. You have the option between two people.
You said it, yes.
Shalom, my name is Rudy Rockman. We're outside of the 2020 AIPAC Policy Conference, Hebrew year 5780. Our mission is to engage with the protesters outside, to break out of our echo chambers, and to either expose anti-Semitism or to create genuine, nuanced conversations in order to write a better future together. Let's see what we get. Yalla.
You know what I'm saying? My whole problem with religion is you have this one belief that you're right. You know what I'm saying? That my God is real and whatever the case may be. But when you bring religion into state, that's a big problem. You know what I'm saying? Because
it has nothing to do with religion.
Yeah.
So can I break down why a lot of the Jewish people don't consider Judaism a religion?
Okay.
So you seem like a really intellectual guy, so I'm happy we're having this conversation.
I'm happy with it.
The definition of a religion in the English language is a belief system in a God, deity, book, or prophet. So if you don't believe in that God, deity, book, or prophet, you're not a part of that religion.
Right.
Hence, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're an atheist, not a Christian.
Right.
You don't believe in the teachings of Buddha, you're not a Buddhist, and so on, any religion. In Judaism, even if you don't believe in God and the Torah, which is our book, you're still a Jew. Because not a belief system that crossed over borders, it's a physical nation from Judea that were displaced from their land, and in order to preserve their identity, they created a portable suitcase called Judaism, and ism is a man-made thing, and in this suitcase they packed in their culture, their value system, their history, their language, their laws, also their connection to higher power. Native Americans also have connections to higher powers, everything inside, and passed it down generation to generation in order to one day come back home. So coming back home is not because God gave us the land, it's because it's a return back to the homeland that we were promised on. I'm sure you've seen movies where Jews break the glass and scream Mazel Tov. Have you seen that imagery? That breaking of the glass represents the destruction of our capital, Jerusalem, and the promise that the kids of our marriage will one day come back home and revive that civilization. So the return to Israel through Zionism, Zion is Jerusalem, right? The return to Jerusalem is the aspirations of the indigenous native people of that land coming back home, and the only time in history where the Jews were actually, or any native people, were able to fulfill their aspirations of coming back home and kicking out the British, the colonial force. So unfortunately, a lot of people see Judaism as a religion, so they don't understand why we have a connection to the land. Because a Nigerian Christian or Argentinian Christian and a Chinese Christian, all different peoples. Same belief system, but different peoples, different histories, different futures. But Jews, no matter where we live, we all come from one land. That's why we have the same language, the same history, and yeah, maybe along the way we picked up certain things that made us different, because that's what happens in the diaspora. Do you agree that the Jews have a right to self-determine in their land the same way the natives have a right to self-determine here, the same way the Tibet...
Well, it depends, because natives obviously don't have a right, as far as with the water thing that was going on.
But you're against that, right?
Hell yeah, I'm against that.
So shouldn't you be against the people trying to take away the water rights and land rights?
That's the whole thing. They said, you know what I'm saying, it's the whole, how you were explaining it, kind of already had the land, but it got taken away. Either way, Palestine has some of the land now, right?
Okay, hold on, no. So hold up. So what happened is 2,000 years ago, we had a civilization, the native civilization. The Roman Empire came, conquered that civilization, and called it Palestine as an act of colonization. This is 2,000 years ago. Islam is 1,500 years. So there's a 500 plus year gap, because it was through the spread of Islam that Arabs got there. So it wasn't the second Islam was born that Arabs moved right away. So add even more years than to the 500 years, the Arabs didn't even live in the land of Israel when it was called Palestine. Now why did the Romans call the land Palestine? Because there's a Philistine people. I'm sure you've heard of Samson and Delilah.
Yeah,
so when the Roman Empire conquered Judea, in order to insult the memory of the Jews, they named it by one of our former greatest enemies, which were people from Greece, not even related to the Arabs today from the east. So they named the land as a form of colonization and called the land Palestine. Then the Roman Empire falls, Byzantine Empire rises, they preserve the name Palestine, Byzantine Empire falls, different empires rise and falls, Ottomans, British, and there was never civilization that existed. It was only a territory controlled by different foreign empires. Now during colonization, you also have colonial migration. You have different minorities pouring into the land. That's why today you have Armenians, Muslims, Christians, Druzim, Bedouin. You have all sorts of minorities that have moved into the land for religious or economic opportunities. However, regardless of those individuals living there, it's still the native Judean population land. Now, what Israel did is in 1948, it freed the land from the British. They kicked out the British, they made the price of occupation more expensive than the benefits of exploitation. We forced the British to realize that it was better for them to leave economically than to stay, by blowing up their oil refinery in Haifa, by blowing up their hotels. Now regardless if someone agrees or not, that's what they did. Like you saw the movie Avatar, right?
Yeah.
Imagine the British like the human beings, and the Jews like the blue avatar, and we won.
Yeah.
And we finally, for the first time in history, were the only native people to revive their civilization. Now, what happened after that? The surrounding Arab countries, not the populations, because the populations and the leadership are different, and they should be separated. The leaders did not want a Jewish state, so they all attacked Israel, and since then, the local Arabs that have been living there, that now identify as Palestinian, have been caught in this war, where the Jews are trying to fight powers that are trying to destroy us. And the reality that exists is we have to find...
So it's not with Palestine.
There's never been a country called Palestine. It was a territory called Palestine that was called by the Romans, that was passed down to different colonial powers, and eventually called Israel through the liberation of that land from the British onto the Jews. Now there are Arabs that live there, and they started calling themselves Palestinian in 1964. Israel was created in 1948, meaning there's almost 20 years that pass before the Arabs call themselves Palestinian. Why? Yasser Arafat, who was the leader at the time, who by the way was born and raised in Egypt, so he's not even a local Levantine Arab, said, okay, if the land before was called the British Mandate of Palestine, let's remove British Mandate and we'll just call it Palestine, and it's now Israel. If we now call ourselves Palestinian, that means we came before them. And the world won't know the history of the connection of the Jewish people. They won't know the history, even the name, Philistines. The name itself is a Hebrew word called invaders. Like Palestine literally in Hebrew translates to invaded land. That's why the Romans called it that. It comes from the word plishtim, root word polesh. Polesh means to invade, plishtim invaders. So the world won't know all this history. They'll just know this is what it was called then, this is what it's called now, we came before. And they've been trapped in this reality where we can't actually coexist with each other because we see our suffering as like, we need to use it as political ammunition to attack the other.
Right.
And the reality that exists that I tell both sides is there's no future reality without both populations finding a way to live together. Palestinians won't disappear, Israelis won't disappear. But there is a way to end the injustices on both sides and fulfill the aspirations. But to do so, we need to start communication and we need to start humanization. If we continue to see each other as the enemy, like what's happening here, then the conflict continues. And that's the real issue.
Definitely made valid points. I mean, that's what we were talking about pretty much as far as coexisting. And like I said, at first, before actually receiving that much knowledge, I was definitely sided with Palestine because I felt like they were being, brushed under. Like,
still side with them. Be pro both. I say if you're anti-one, you're anti-both because the reality is neither are going to disappear. A zero-sum game approach to this situation is allowing the conflict to continue. Don't be anti-Palestinian. Be pro-Palestinian, but also pro-Israeli. And that is the real issue. That's the crime, because there are people profiting from this conflict.
So that's what, okay, so far as, does Trump support Israel? Does Israel support Trump?
So, for example, Trump, if he truly supported Israel, he should end the foreign aid to Israel. Why? Because the foreign aid is not giving money to Israel, it's giving credit to Israel. So what does that cause? In the IDF, all of our weapons, our guns, our planes, our tanks, our bullets, our boots, our uniforms are made in the US. That causes Israel to be completely dependent, military, on another country, and allowing that country to impose foreign policy on it. If Trump was really pro-Israel, then he should remove that policy and allow Israel to create those jobs in Israel to allow us to profit from ourselves, our own economy, and to be dependent on ourselves. Because let's say, even if Trump is pro-Israel, it's not necessarily the next president. So if he truly cared for our long-term survival, then he would remove that policy. And there are things that he's done that is good, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem, in my opinion. However, there's a lot of things that he maintains that are bad, or pushing a two-state solution. A two-state solution, any conversation with a two-state solution prevents us from having real conversations that could create real solutions. Because
you gotta hear both sides, right?
Yeah. Look, the end of the day, two things have to be addressed: injustices for both, and aspirations for both. A two-state solution does neither for either.
No, it's just slap together.
It's like, okay, Jews can't and Arabs can't live together. Separate yourselves.
So separate states.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And that doesn't allow Jews to be able to live in Judea and Samaria. It doesn't allow Arabs to go live in Akko and in places where they want to live as well. So this idea of separation and divide and conquer is a very Western perspective mindset to just impose, and they need to get out of it and allow the local people that actually have a stake in this. Because I live in Israel. My kids will be born there. And Palestinian kids will be born there as well. So I have a stake in trying to find a way to come together. But the rest of the world has a stake in continuing this conflict because it sells. It sells both with weapons and it sells both in the media, and the money keeps cycling and this conflict keeps going and we keep dying about it.
Right, so like you said, so the powers that be just control y'all. Hey, they did this, they did that.
Yeah.
Fun, probably both sides, like how America usually
exactly
does. And wow, that's crazy. So okay. Thank you, ladies. See, 'cause I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, like I was, like she explained Zionism to me because I thought there's a difference between Judaism and Zionism, which how did you explain it again? He was like,
Jewish people's right to self-determination.
yes, and you pretty much reiterated that fact. So now I just gotta go home, pretty much do some more piecing together, and find out a way, like both sides can come together. Because that's the things that, this has been the whole mantra, it should be for this year, of coexisting, like humans coexisting, period. Us as humans should have the right sovereignty to live, period. Yes, it should be rules, and in a sense of, what should I say, not just rules, but like order, you know what I'm saying? Something that we can all, naturally follow. Everybody has power but the actual people who live the lives, the actual people who run this building, you know what I'm saying? That's my whole problem.
Democracy is a lie. You have the option between two people.
You said it, yes. Democracy is a fucking lie.
Anyways, brother.
Oh, y'all take care, okay? Keep fighting.
You too. Peace.